Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Mary and today I'm going to show you a gouache technique that I know that some people have some difficulty with, so hopefully this video will help illuminate you and give you the skills to make the images that you want to create. So what I'm going to show you today is how to do gradient washes with gouache. Gouache behaves a little bit differently from watercolor because of the ingredients of the paint. And so getting gradient washes involves a few different techniques. Because we're working with mattifiers and more pigment, which make the paints opaque, doing gradients sometimes requires a little bit more attention, because if you get too much water in it, you're not going to get the result that you're looking for. So I'm going to do 3 different gradients, all from sort of pink to blue, which would be like a sunrise or a sunset or something like that. And I'll show you a few different consistencies of washes that you can do. One thing I want to note is that I'm going to be using a lot of white. This is actually going to help. Working straight pigments, especially with things that can be quite transparent, like quinacridone red is a quite transparent pigment, is difficult because you're going to get it to be streaky no matter what you do. So I think the last one I do here is going to be the straight pigments, just so you can see the difference. But I'm going to start with a nice pastel one here. I'll do it with less paint in this one, and then we'll do the straight pigments. So always when you're doing a large area with gouache, you want to make sure that you mix enough paint. This is important because gouache dries differently than how it looks when it's wet. So if you don't mix enough, you're going to get very often a very different color than what you mixed in the first place. So mixing it all at once just make sure that you're going to have the color that you want. So what I'm doing here is I'm mixing in individual trays so that the gouache can have a place to sit and it's not going to run everywhere. I love trays with these little round wells because they hold a lot of paint. So when I get in here, I'll be able to coat my brush fully, and it's going to make a really nice large quantity of the color that I want. So I'm just mixing that pink there, maybe a little more water. You want it to sort of look like whipping cream before it's whipped. This is just ultramarine blue and white. If you want to do more of a sky color, you're going to want to add a little bit of a warmer blue or in a cooler blue together. So usually I'll do a bit of cerulean and some ultramarine put together. That makes a bit more of a sky color. Or you can use ultramarine and a bit of a phthalo blue, just whatever you're more comfortable with. All right, so for gouache, I prefer using larger, flatter brushes. So I'm going to be using this angle brush here, which is basically like, it's going to be like a spatula for the paint, because the paint is thick but not like textured. It's going to dry flat. You want something that'll scoop up enough paint in one go. So I definitely recommend large angle brushes for gouache. I think they're one of the first ones I used when I was learning to paint with gouache, and it made it a lot easier because you can grab enough paint to cover a flat area with just one sort of dab. So here's the pink, and I'm going to lay it down on this side here. And then I'm going to clean my brush And you have to work quite quickly. You don't want it to dry. And I'm going to get the blue here and lay it in on this side. And basically what you're going to do, since it's still wet, I'm going to dry off my brush and start over here and just start blending. Just blend it back and forth with the wet paint. If you need more pink or more blue to balance it out, get a bit more, drag it down to the other side. And as you see, by the time I've reached this side of the page, there's basically no pink left on my brush. I've used it all in creating the gradient. So as you can see, I just like messed up and got some blue over here, which is fine because you can just grab more pink and just get it on there. So it's not a perfect method, but it works pretty dang well. You can also always remember, you know, you have to clean your brush between each swipe, but you can take sort of a damp, clean brush and just go over everything to smooth it out. And if you need a little more blue, get a little more blue. And just continue this until you're happy with the gradient. So that's all working wet into wet, so you have to go rather fast. If you're covering an area that's larger than what I've covered, just use a larger brush. That's it, basically, just use a larger brush. So now I'm going to go to the second row here, and I'm going to use a little more water. So I'm not going to have as thick of a layer of paint, and there's more chance for contamination this way too. And I'm gonna really pool it on there. You see it's getting quite puddly. I'm using a lot more water than the other one. But basically one way of doing a big wash like this is to let the water do the work for you. And as you can see, the water will even it out on its own. The pigments are dispersing in the water because there's more water. And that's another technique I love to use, wet into wet. This is just more wet than the first one. So this one will probably dry with a few like dendrite, fingery sort of guys, depending on the pigments you're using. Yeah, I think that works really good for large areas as well. This works mostly because I'm using a lot of white, and the white is so opaque, and the white behaves differently in the water. So anyway, that's one way of doing it. I'm going to clean up here, and then we'll do the full intensity pigments on the bottom. All right. Again, for this one, we're using a big brush. Always want to use a big brush for big washes. That's going to hold the water that you need for it and make everything easier. I am going to dip into the Quin Red here and just turn it into sort of a cream color. And you'll see what I mean by it's not very opaque. Quinacridone red. A lot of reds actually are they're very transparent. So this is going to look more like a watercolor wash for sure. And if you want this to be completely clean, you're going to want to use like really clean palette, really clean water, really clean brush, which I'm not precisely. I'm going for, you know, more of a quick and dirty look. So my water actually has a bit of white pigment floating around in it, just from the other washes. And that's all right with me. So I'm gonna build this up a little bit, get more of that blue in here. But basically, like, I think the main thing to take away from this is that with gouache, using white is the key. The white opens up your pigments. It's going to keep them from getting muddy, and it's going to give you that specific gouache look. Now, in trying to get a better gradient with these darker colors, I've used too much water. So how am I going to get back from this? I'm just going to get more paint, which is going to be, I guess, you know, it's going to be helpful for those of you that struggle with gouache. And the point of this is basically, like, when you're learning, I think it's easier to learn with more white. These dark pigments are hard to control. They're not meant to be used straight out of the tube alone. So I'm going to load up a little bit more on here and show you. Like, even with just the Quin Red paint, it's still streaky. And this can be really frustrating. Like, oh, why is my paint streaky? It's just because it doesn't have white in it. And the white is adding more opaque pigments, basically. The white increases the opacity. So I find that people who start off with gouache and they're like, oh, I hate how it looks because my paint is so streaky, like, using these dark colors is always difficult. They are meant to be mixed. They're meant to be combined. And see, even I, someone who paints with gouache frequently and have been for years, even I make a pretty ugly gradient when I'm using these straight out of the tube. So I hope for you beginners out there this was helpful and enlightening. I'll show you all the dry gradients now. I think just because my paper's warping and I got a little blob of red in this one gradient, you know, they're not perfect, but they look nice, right? The top two look nice. The bottom one looks like I struggled because I did. So if you're looking to create nice looking gouache pieces and you're just starting out, remember to use white and to mix your colors. Let me know if this video was helpful, and let me know if there are any gouache techniques you'd like me to go over in the future. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!